Welcome back to another episode of the Boss Juice podcast. Today we have a really, really cool guest, John Henne of Henne Jewelers. So kind of before we get started, before we kind of get into your story here, I would like to ask if you don't mind talking about this really cool new space you have going on here, because it looks beautiful. Honestly, I don't think the video would do it justice, but it looks incredible. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we've undertaken a major renovation of our retail location on Walnut Street and Shadyside. And we converted a building that had multiple tenants, apartments on the third floor, offices on the second floor, our retail store on the first, and we've converted to all single use. And we are right now on the third floor in our offices, but it turned out so nice that we are going to use it for some client-facing activities.
Cool, yeah. It does look beautiful, I have to say. So that's awesome. It's come along really nice.
We're super excited about it. The customers have been raving about it. Many of them have commented that our retail store, the showroom, doesn't look like it's in Pittsburgh. It looks like it's on Madison Avenue or Fifth Avenue in New York.
Yeah, I can attest to that for sure. That's pretty cool. So without further ado, though, if we want to get into your story a little bit. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, so I know of your store. I kind of know a little bit of your background. And if I'm not mistaken, your great-grandfather started the jeweler, right?
Yeah, in 1887, Rudolf Joesph Henne founded Henne Jewelers, and he was a watchmaker. He had apprenticed, and he started his own store. Back then, if you worked on the railroad, you had to have your watch serviced at least every 30 days. And so that's what he did most of the time. He was also selling flatware, jewelry, diamonds. He was an optician. He was a generalist, but in a very, very small location in East Liberty.
Wow, that's really cool. So watches are really popular. I mean, today, but I didn't realize that people actually, it makes sense, but to think that, people design and make their own watches is incredible. So I didn't know that. Do you still sell any custom made watches here today?
Well, when we refer to a watchmaker, they're really a watch service person.
Gotcha.
They repair and service watches, some vintage, some new. We don't have anybody custom making watches at the moment.
Interesting. Okay, cool. And so how did you get involved with the business? Because, if I'm not mistaken as well, I believe that this wasn't your first career, right?
That's correct. I was a CPA at KPMG in the audit and then the tax department, which I really enjoyed, and it gave me a great background in business. But my father was running the business at the time, and he came to me and said, if you have any interest in coming in the business, now's the time. There's no obligation. You don't have to, but it's a nice way of providing for your family and doing something that you can really enjoy and love. And I always admired my dad and what he did, and so I took that opportunity to come into the business about 32 years ago.
That's awesome. Is it still very much a family business? Do any of your kids work here or anything like that?
I have 4 sons, and they do work in the summertime, and they're going to be coming this week, the Christmas week, and helping out. And we've actually worked with a family business succession consultant, and have come up with a plan and an agreement that we've already shared with our kids, who are ages 21 down to 15, about what it might look like if they were to come into the business.
Cool.
That's what a great way to map that out, helping with their futures, because you don't know what direction anybody really wants to go. They might want the benefit of the business, and that's it. They don't want to be a part of it. So the fact that you're so serious about this, you hired a succession planner or consultant, I think is an amazing idea. And this is so different than a lot of the interviews that we conduct. Go back to the original question about railroads and watches and repairs and keeping the timepiece accurate. Railroads, it just seems like it takes me back to the 1800s, moving to early 1900s. This is way before, obviously, cell phones, anything like that. And, I use my iPhone for pretty much everything, whereas I think that timepiece was significant for so many reasons. Think of the train industry and what timing meant, so having an accurate piece, is that something as far as the history goes that you can speak on? Do you know about that?
Yeah, it was extremely critical. In fact, they had to do it as mandated in order to work on the railroad. You had to have that checked and serviced every 30 days because it was that important. Quartz movements didn't come out till the 70s, so these were manual wind or pocket watches typically in the 1800s, early 1900s. And you're right, the automobile wasn't really around. Right. We have a photo downstairs showing our store, and there's a reflection in the window of the livery stable across the street. They were horse and buggy.
No
So
way.
that's how old this business is and what my grandfather, great-grandfather were dealing with at the time.
Isn't it incredible though how your grandfather or even the great grandfather, fourth generation now with your kids if they choose to get
I'm
involved
fourth.
with the business? You're fourth. Wow. It's really neat. I just think that somebody saw a niche along the way and they had a passion for something and pulled it together. You talk about the entrepreneurial bug and spirit. This is it's a completely different vibe, than a lot of the interviewees that we've spoken with. And I love the fact that you've been in business 140 plus years, somewhere around in there. And think of how this started. It's really cool and where it'll be. I mean, the simple fact that you've done this incredible build out that people really need to get in here and see some of this. And you'd mentioned, maybe using some of this space for different functions and things like that. It's going to be gorgeous. It's beautiful where it is right now. And I bet you've got to be really excited about where this is going to go.
Yeah,
We're super excited. In fact, we did this major renovation really looking towards the future, not for the next 5 years, but for the next 20 years, for the next 25 years, likely when my sons are involved in the business.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point, though, because I think one of the questions I had coming into this kind of episode here is that jewelry, so I own a software business, and my overhead to produce a mobile application or software application is pretty high, but in terms of like labor. So I don't carry a lot of, what's the term I want to use, upfront costs until the project starts. Once the project starts, it's expensive, but like if have no work, I'm just kind of sitting there, there's no really overhead costs. Jewelry, though, I'm assuming it's expensive to kind of acquire, and you're kind of holding this large sum of inventory before it's sold. So I'm curious, how hard is it to get into the jewelry business? Like, if I was going to come into the jewelry business, how easy is it to kind of get started?
I think it's challenging for someone to get started. As you mentioned, there's a significant upfront investment in inventory. People have done it. They slowly build up. In fact, from the time I came in the business to where we are now, we probably carry 15 to 20 times the amount of inventory that we did back then.
Wow.
But one of the reasons why we only have one location as opposed to multiple is because I want to give the same experience in the same amount of viewing opportunities, the number of bracelets and watches to see. And I can't replicate that at the moment because of capital in another location.
Interesting. That's really cool. And so when you're talking about the future, do you see the kind of jewelry industry changing in that, I don't know if it relates to this kind of industry, but I know I come from the software side of things. So e-commerce, is getting big. And one of the things they talk about is like drop shipping or, not storing inventory on a location and kind of having different ways of cutting the cost of inventory. I don't see that kind of relating to the jewelry industry just because it's so unique, and not to kind of knock other businesses, but the merchandise that you're selling is valuable compared to like, t-shirts or whatever it may be. Do you see the e-commerce realm kind of shifting, the business in the future at all?
We certainly are trying to adapt using a lot of the efficiencies that other businesses bring. And so our inventory turn is significantly better than it was 20 and 30 and 40 years ago. And we're certainly striving for that. And we are growing our e-commerce. I mentioned to you, we have right behind you is a little studio that we're going to be using to work with people remotely. That could be someone down the street or someone on another part of the country. And we've actually seen a lot of success through referrals, particularly in engagement rings and wedding bands, through that.
Yeah, that was really cool. I don't know if you were here when he was telling me about that, but if you don't mind talking about that a little bit, it's really cool. They have the kind of like Zoom online camera thing that can have the depictions of the jewelry, which is, I think, really cool. That's an interesting way to shop, and especially like, I think back to the pandemic, that'd be a really interesting way to buy jewelry.
Yeah, so we kind of strung it together on a shoestring. We used an iPhone and a computer camera where we would just show the jewelry there and show the person, and the iPhone didn't do it justice to show the jewelry. So we actually have, in January, we're purchasing a much more sophisticated camera system that will allow us to show the jewelry up close and beautiful, just as if you're standing in front of it, and show the salesperson we've been selling remotely for years and years and years through referrals. I have a number of clients that have trusted me through all the years for engagement ring, wedding bands, and gifts for anniversaries, and they've never, ever been in our jewelry store.
Wow. That's actually really cool because you think about it. I mean, I try to relate every business we talk to my business, and I always say to Shawn, when I sell software, the software is not cheap. So like people aren't, just spending $100, with us. They're spending thousands of dollars with us. So it's like COVID was a weird time because it was like we got new clients that I physically never met, and like till this day, some of them I have never physically met in person. It's like, how do you build a trusting relationship with someone virtually? When they're kind of shelling out a good chunk of change for your product. So it is an interesting kind of model.
It really is. It comes mostly through the referral.
Mm-hmm.
I always say, truly, they're trusting their friend.
Sure.
Through the referral, and then it's my job to show that I am an expert in my field, that I do genuinely care, and that I'm going to treat them right. And there was just someone I'm dealing with in Tennessee who's considering an engagement ring, and I also said, listen, I know another jewelry store down in Tennessee that I'm sure would take care of you. So if you find something there, that's okay.
Right.
I know that I'm going to provide something great, but please know that you can make that decision. And he said at the end, he said, no, I really want to get it from you because of the referral that he came through his friend.
That's funny because you've both have used the word trust several times here. And I'm from an era where you look at different people as your trusted advisors, your attorney, your doctor, your dentist. You can go right on down the line. There are a few people that you, throughout your life, you really rely on as a trusted source. And in my opinion, your jeweler fits in that same category. And I think we were talking earlier before we got on camera, we mentioned about how your clients have become some of your best ambassadors, your best silent salespeople. And that's got to be a tribute and a testimony to the products you offer and the way that you treat people. Talk to us a little bit about your audience. What do these people look like?
Well, actually, we span all demographics. I love it when young people come in. Mm-hmm. We had the daughter of a customer in on Saturday and got to spend some time with her. One of our best customers years ago shared with me that she came in as a young teenager, and my dad spent an hour with her going over all the gemstones on a bracelet. Wow. And she said she never forgot that. Wow. And then she developed into one of our best customers. Now, typically, we're not really selling to teenagers, but we do take care of everybody. We really do realize that the first major jewelry purchase for most people is an engagement ring. And so when I came in the business 30 years ago, my dad had kind of given up on the engagement ring business because it was very competitive. It was easy to overstate the grades. And if you were being honest, you looked expensive. Now, that was before most stones were certified. So I certified all of our diamonds. I reduced our margins, increased our inventory, and started marketing to our friends. And we grew it from 2% to over 35% of our business.
Wow, that's incredible.
Where did you pick up the background information, the knowledge base that kind of sits on your shoulders as far as gems go, and probably design, and then to be trained in repair with something that is so intricate and requires different skill sets? What's your background? I know you talked about before you started here for a minute, but how did you get this education?
I learned it from my father. I really just followed him the first 2 years and learned. At the same time, he was really open with me taking over and making decisions and taking on new responsibility. Very early on, I was in my 20s. My dad said to me, eventually, this business will be owned by you and your sisters, and the decisions we make today will impact that future. So you should be making the decisions.
Wow.
He didn't hang on to that, which many people do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point because, we like to talk about on the show a lot too about the hard times of business, and not to highlight the negative aspects of business, but to kind of educate our listeners that I always say to our interviewees that I had this mentality growing up where I had friends who had parents that owned businesses, and I knew that they had a good amount of money, they were successful, and I correlated, you own a business, you have money, you have success. And that is not always the case. It's hard to run a business. And a lot of the decisions you make early on affect the decisions you make in the future. And so you have a unique kind of situation here where this is kind of a family business that has been passed down to you from two separate generations. How has, have you ever looked back at some of the decisions maybe your father made or your great-grandfather made and said, oh man, like if I could go back and change that, I would have done it differently? Or, how did you adapt kind of to taking over this business and making your own decisions?
Well, my dad was a product of the Depression generation, and he was very averse to taking risk and to going into debt. And so the first time that we did a major expansion, we did go into debt. We had to go to the bank, and my dad he was a great consultant, and he would share his feelings about that regularly and say, I don't think we should do it. I don't think we should do it. Finally, I said, Dad, I really appreciate your opinion, but we've already signed the lease and we've already signed the bank loan. So we are moving forward, and we came into this location 20 years ago. And what I love about my dad is that he walked in the front door and he said, well, I'm so glad I was for this from the beginning.
Yeah. That's great.
Reminds me of my dad. That's really cool though, because that's interesting too. When you talk about the Depression era and kind of being adverse to risk and you kind of being willing to take more risk, my mentality on business is that business is a risk in general. I mean, a calculated risk, but it's a risk. And so when you look at, your background is in accounting, you were a CPA, correct? Mm-hmm. So how did that help you relate kind of like, taking on that debt and calculating the risks of that? Are you more so a numbers guy when you run this business, when you're purchasing inventory, or do you kind of view this as, a creative experience? Because, the reason why I ask is the renovations here look incredible. And you talked a bit with me before this about having your customers experience, being here and, the experience of being here. So how does those two sides of the business kind of, and like your background in accounting kind of help you in decision making?
Well, as a former CPA, and I kiddingly say, I see the world in spreadsheets. I tend to like the numbers. I delve into the numbers. I do break-even analysis. I do budgeting. I do planning. And you're right, you do take on a lot of risk. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was doing the planning during COVID, when we were actually shut down for 2 months, and I started doing break-even analysis at down 20%, then down 30%, then 50%. And I could not get it to break even at down 80% is where we ended up for those 2 months in COVID. And then the creative side is something that I possess a little bit, but I really rely on our team who are much more creative than I am. And we have Nina, who's been with us for 45 years. She's our buyer. She learned from my father. She actually does her own designs, and she does all of our visual merchandising. She is extremely creative, and I've learned a lot from her.
That's really cool. And by designs, do you mean of actual jewelry pieces? And oh, that's cool. So how does can you speak on that a little bit? How does that work? The design.
Yeah. So we have 4 goldsmiths here, and Nina, who's a designer. So Nina doesn't sit at the bench, but she can design and put together a lot of pieces, and she works collaboratively with our jewelers who actually manufacture the jewelry right here on site.
Oh, no way. I did not know that. Mm-hmm. So would you say that that's the largest part of your business, or is it more kind of the inventory side?
That's actually a small part of our business. Okay. For Jewelers is a nice shop, and my desire is to grow that. I'd love to see us get to at least a dozen jewelers, where we're doing lots more manufacturing of our own product right now. With the size of the business, they're spending a lot of their time on service and repair, and only can do a limited amount of time dedicated to custom jewelry design and some things that they actually get to put in their own showcases.
Wow, that's interesting.
With the client base that you serve, and what you mentioned, it's you're not pigeonholed into one category. You serve a lot of different types of people. Do you think they most look at, hey, it's just a beautiful piece, or it's great service, or do they look at this as an investment?
That's a great question. I think they look at all of that. Mm-hmm. I've absolutely seen people who look at it as an investment, and they've experienced it in their family, or they've heard of others. And we've certainly seen that. A number of years ago, I helped a person sell a diamond that they had purchased 20 years before. They were able to net twice what was paid for it 20 years prior. So, but they also got to enjoy it that entire time. There's also sentimental value associated with it. And that's one thing that I love about our business, is that you're getting something beautiful that you can wear and enjoy, but then you can also pass that on to future generations. I have my grandfather's pocket watch that he received on his 21st birthday. And around this time of year, I typically pick that up and I wind it. And I think of my grandfather. It's not something that I get to wear often, but something that's still really, really important to me.
Yeah. What is of the pieces maybe that have passed through here, is there one piece that you would recall maybe that went to a client, an heirloom piece that you really love? Can you talk about something like that?
There was actually, it was my grandmother's sapphire and diamond ring that came through. I was too young to have, I wasn't married at the time. I didn't have someone to give it to. And my aunt ended up selling that. She no longer had an interest in it. And coincidentally, a very good friend of mine, she owns the exact same ring because her grandmother and my grandmother were friends. And I see that ring on her. It's not particularly valuable. It's very unique in that it identifies the time period. But that's a piece that I really wish that we hadn't sold, that I kept that in the family.
Wow, that's pretty neat.
It is really neat, yeah. So I got a question too that's just more out of curiosity. Who is, in your opinion, the coolest client you've served? If you can't name drop, that's fine. But it's just, I grew up in Pittsburgh, so like your jeweler is a well-known name. And so I always had this mentality in my head that they got to see some cool people walk in the door.
We definitely see some really interesting people. And what I will tell you, they are remarkable. Sometimes you look at them as unapproachable and, oh my gosh, they're a star or they're super wealthy. And I find that they are genuinely kind, nice, easy people to deal with. Wiz Khalifa is a client. He's been in, and he is a wonderful guy. Many of the athletes and many of the well-known, industrialists and financiers have been clients.
Sure. Yeah. That's cool because it's like, this is like the one, like the jewelry industry is like the one industry that everyone, no matter what class or lifestyle you come from, you're going to purchase a piece of jewelry at some point, So I think that's really interesting. And I do like your point about the, kind of the heirloom thing. I didn't think about that because I come from a very Italian family, and I don't know if you ever heard like the Maloik or the, So I like from the day I was born, I think I've ever taken off this chain because it's just a chain with like a little pepper on it.
Yeah, right.
And it just sits there, and it's like that is like, constantly in my family, and it reminds me of my grandparents, and there is this huge sentimental piece to it that is almost priceless.
Absolutely. We've seen so many people cherish those, and oftentimes, what I like to say, it's a tangible representation of the character and the legacy that your family has left for you.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to put it. Yeah.
Well, I'm a marketing and branding guy, and when I heard that we had an opportunity to sit down with you in the name, I start humming in the back of my mind the little jingle. It's you guys have done an outstanding job just being consistent with your message year after year after year. Is there, with this build out and the renovation, is there anything that clients can expect from a service standpoint that would be different? Is there anything that you're adding now? I know we talked a little bit about the online with using, digital aspect to be able to broadcast and show certain things. What else do you have going on here?
Well, we've expanded our product selection as we've doubled the size of the store. But the one thing that I'm excited to say is that they're going to experience the same level of service they've always experienced. You're going to walk into a store that looks like it's on Madison Avenue, but you're still going to be welcomed warmly like we always have, where we care for our customer, whether you're coming in for a watch battery or for an expensive diamond necklace. And that service is going to stand there. And we are growing. We have a watchmaker. We have 4 jewelers. I'd like to continue to add to that so that we can continue to service our customers really well.
Another question, because it is such an investment, okay? Do you also consult or advise on insuring certain pieces, and how does that whole process work?
That's something I actually really enjoy, is to meet with clients and say, I'd be happy to go over your jewelry collection and advise on how to insure it. In my experience, most people are either underinsured or overinsured because they've added everything to their policy along the way. And most insurance companies have an automatic escalation every year of 2, 3, or 5%. And if you're not paying attention, after 20 years, all of a sudden that could have gone up to a much higher number than it actually is to replace it. And I always say, if you lost everything, would you replace all of it? Most people wouldn't. So I like to recommend that you insure somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 70% of the value of your jewelry and watch collection.
Wow. Those are things that you don't even typically think about. And the other piece I think that's really important, this is a family-owned, 140 plus years, something like that. It's not your little retail, box store kind of experience, I wouldn't think. We've never met before, but I can tell just by talking the way that you really do care about people and you want to help them as you become that trusted advisor if you're not already there. That whole customer experience, like what is a typical traffic day here like, if there is such a thing?
That's people walk in and say, what are you doing? Are you giving stuff away? There's so many people in your store.
Yeah.
And that is exciting that we are seeing more and more people. We're being introduced to more and more people. Same time, taking care of some of the families that we've taken care of for generations. And that service element is so important. And I always like to say that we hire people who genuinely love people. I'm constantly complimented on our team. My gosh, they're so amazing. They really care. And I said, because they genuinely do. I'm not teaching them that. We're hiring people who genuinely care about people.
Yeah. And I think it starts really with the leadership. You set the tone. You make sure that it sounds like you make sure that your employees are taken care of, and you put them on pedestals. There's expectations and things like that. And I think when you have a good nucleus of people, it's really, you can't lose servicing people, with your clients.
Yeah, something that I strongly believe in is that as the owner of the business or a leader in the business, it's my responsibility to create an environment where my team enjoys what they do, but I like to say 70 to 80% of the time. Not 100% of the time. There's bad days. Things go wrong. There's challenges. But they should enjoy coming to work. They shouldn't be dreading walking through that door. They should feel valued. They should like what they do, and that's important to me. And so we regularly talk about that. I want input from them on things that we can do to continue to enhance their experience here, just as we do to enhance our customers' experience.
What other things do you do to retain these people? You said the one lady who's an expert in a lot of different directions, she'd been here 40 plus years. So what do you do to keep them motivated and wanting to come here and feel excited about this place?
Yeah, Nina's been here 45 years, and we just celebrated William Shanley's 50th anniversary with us. Wow. He had worked 2 years prior to that part-time, so he's actually been here 52 years. But we really try and create that environment where they enjoy it 70 to 80% of the time. We value them. We also try and be understanding of their personal time. There was a period for a while where we actually opened Sundays in December, and that was causing some people to work 7 days a week straight through. And it was challenging and difficult. And we said, you know what? Chick-fil-A can close on Sunday. We can close on Sundays in December. So this year we're going to encounter it where Christmas Eve, which is a busy day for us, is on a Sunday. But we're going to be closed. We're going to be home with our families.
Cool.
And I think that's a testament to the way that you manage and care for this place and the people that work here.
Yeah. I think you bring up an interesting kind of point there. And when I do these interviews, I always try to relate back to my business just because I've noticed that no matter what industry you're in, we kind of share similar experiences. And so I've mentioned this before on the show to Shawn, but I had this experience a couple years ago where we were busy. I'm texting one of my guys about a project, and I'll never forget, he responded and said, "Hey man, it's like 9:30. I'm like, "Oh yeah, no problem." Like, blah, blah. He's like, "No, but like I'm getting ready to go to bed." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And it hit me. I'm like, I'm sorry. It's like, but as a business owner, I'm sure you can relate to. It's tough where you want to treat your employees right, and you want to close on those holidays and on Sundays and stuff like that. But I always have this experience where I think I care so much about my business that like it is who I am in a way, and so that becomes very hard for me. Was kind of closing on Sundays a difficult decision? Did it bother you? Did you kind of look at other ways to maybe increase revenue when we're closing on Sunday? Because I'm just curious, because I always relate back to my business, and decisions like that always weighed on me.
It was challenging, and I had many advisors who have retail jewelry stores in other parts of the country, and they said, "Oh, you got to be open on Sunday. You don't know what you're missing." Other people on Walnut Street said, "You got to be open on Sunday." And that was hard. But truly, I was in the mall on a Sunday and saw Chick-fil-A closed. And I said, and the place was packed. And I said, if they can do it, we can do it. We can care about our employees. You're right. As a business owner, you live it. It's not 40-hour week. It's not a 60-hour week. It is 24/7. And you're thinking about it all the time. And with today's technology, I'm getting texts from clients all hours. And I've run into the same experience where I've texted employees in hours when I shouldn't. And I'm really trying to send emails and let them know that if an email comes your way, you do not need to respond to that. A text is something I am looking for a response sooner, but sometimes it's just a way of communicating at this hour, but you don't need to respond to it. I really am trying to be more thoughtful about that, but we as entrepreneurs or business owners, we tend to be thinking 24/7, and it's hard to shut it off.
It is a never-ending cycle. It's like I have lost sleep over some of the things that are on my mind over this, and I think it's having employees is an interesting balance because you do, if you're a good business owner, you care for them. You want them to succeed. You want them to feel welcomed. You want them to want to stay. But then on the flip side, there is where you have a bottom line to meet. You have agendas you need to accomplish, and there is this, like, how do I want to say it? There's this hard balance of keeping them happy, but also trying to get the work done. And that has been one of the hardest experiences for me. Is I'm young, so I started my business in 2017, and I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've learned along the way. But the managing people is not easy, and it is a juggling act because I always say, and maybe you more than me, it's my name on the door. Your name is actually on the door, but it is a tough thing to kind of manage.
It is challenging. You said you've made a lot of mistakes, and I've made tons of mistakes. I've been in the business a lot longer. What I do let our team know is that I'm going to make more. We make mistakes all the time. We move forward. We ask for forgiveness. We say we're sorry. We learn from it, and we make changes. And we will make mistakes with our team. And I do ask them to have some grace and share with me, hey, if you blew it, you shouldn't have done that. And I try and give the same to them. But we have a high standard. We have a high standard of expectation of the level of service they're going to give to our customers. We also then want to give that to them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I got another question here. If you don't mind answering this, because I know sometimes I'm always hesitant to answer questions like this, but I said I made a lot of mistakes and I've learned from them. If you don't mind sharing with our listeners, what is kind of one of the biggest mistakes that you've maybe made, that you've learned from, that the business has gotten better because of that mistake, but kind of sits with you if you could go back and say, oh, I would have changed my decision there?
I remember it well. There's a lot of them, but this one in particular, and it's changed how I take care of problems with customers now. We had a situation where a customer had a diamond, really nice diamond, purchased for them for a significant occasion, and the diamond chipped, had a teeny little nick in it, which is not unusual. Most people don't realize that a diamond can chip. Doesn't happen regularly, but it can. And in this case, I said, listen, I'm going to take it at our expense. We're going to send it overnight to the diamond cutter, have it repaired back to us. You're not going to see it at all. It's going to look perfect. And we're going to spend some money to do this, and we're going to take care of it right away for you. She felt the diamond shouldn't have chipped and kind of felt like she should get a new diamond, which in our industry would be completely unusual. That's not how you would take care of this. And I felt that I was doing right by them, taking care of this diamond. And later I learned that she wasn't happy with that and actually had made a purchase someplace else. And this is someone who'd been trusting us for years. And as I thought back about it, I said, you know what, she's right. If, what I like to say is that diamond was given to her to express love, and that chip is what she thought about as opposed to that expression of love. And so my job is to make sure that she still feels that love. And if she needs to change that diamond, we'll do it. And so I offered to do it after the fact and actually increase the value of what she had gotten. And we changed out the diamond for her. And she's remained a very, very loyal customer and referred many, many people since then. And now I've learned from that and say, if a customer isn't happy with our solution, even if we think it's fair and right, then we've got to do what we can to make sure the customer feels that it's fair and right.
Wow. I think in this video capture here and audio capture, it's so interesting for me when this goes out, because people are going to see the sincerity, in the way that you serve people and in the way that you handle situations. You said, hey, there were many mistakes, but this one is clear cut. It didn't leave your memory. This one, for whatever reason, is etched in there, as much as some of the other ones. But we appreciate you sharing that. So people are always trying to start different businesses and they want to go in different directions and things like that. What is one of the biggest challenges you see in this industry? What's the biggest challenge?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, capital, inventory is one of the biggest challenges. And then certainly, I think your people, you run into a lot of businesses today that are seeing a lot of turnover. And it's important for us that we take care of our people, that they're here, because when a customer comes back in and they want to experience what they've experienced before, they love being greeted by someone who knows their name. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's wonderful if William is here and can say, hi, Mr. So-and-so, it's great to have you back in again. If I'm constantly turning over my people and someone who's a loyal customer of ours walks in and he doesn't see a familiar face and no one knows who he is, we're going to likely lose that person as someone who really feels valued.
Yeah. When I think your customers, now they sense a certain expectation too, probably when they walk through the doors of this beautiful place. Whether they mention it or not, that little greeting, the simple fact that, it's not a high pressure sales situation. It's merely acknowledging the fact that you're happy that somebody walked through the door. And I think that's really important. And again, that ties to your brand as well.
We talk about it with our team a lot. Sometimes we get really, really busy and someone can get missed and they can walk through the door and not be greeted right away and end up towards the back of the store, and then they somehow get missed. It's rare because we really try and walk around and make sure it doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. But they really feel like they're not valued, and they feel like, hey, I'm being judged for some reason. Maybe I came in after the gym and I'm in sweatpants and I'm being looked down upon. We never, ever want anybody to feel that way. We want them to feel welcome, regardless of how they dress, regardless of what they're doing, how they're representing themselves. We want everyone to be appreciated and valued when they come in our store.
So as far as like the location goes, driving here, I told you I hadn't been in Shadyside in a long time, and I remember all the beautiful houses, architecture. We mentioned the Red Bow place up the street. Has there ever been, what other have you ever been in another location, and do you have any interest in expansion anywhere?
For sure. We initially were in East Liberty, so the east end of Pittsburgh is where we've always remained. My dad moved here to Shadyside in 1978. East Liberty was experiencing some challenges, and Shadyside has been great for us. If I had only one location, there's no other place in the city or all of Western Pennsylvania that I'd rather be than right where we are right now in the corner of Walnut and Bellefonte. There are other locations in the city that I think we could expand to. I think we're seeing tremendous growth in the North Hills, and we're seeing tremendous growth as you go deeper south. So there are other places we could go, but right now this is the place that I really want to be.
Nice. Cool. And you mentioned, with the consultant you spoke with your family, with your sons. Do they show an interest in continuing with the business? And is there maybe one in particular that really aspires to taking off with this?
I have 4 sons, and they have all expressed some level of interest. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we've stipulated is they've got to work somewhere else for 5 years before coming into the business. I worked 3 years at KPMG and wished I'd worked a couple more years because it would have given me more management experience. Mm-hmm. And so we're asking them to do that. And I think it's possible that any of them could come in. There is, just like my dad did, there is absolutely no obligation. I want them to do something that they care about, that they're passionate about, that they can get excited and motivated to get up in the morning to do each day. I do believe that this is a wonderful business. We get to deal with people during the happiest times of their lives. You get to develop really meaningful relationships with customers and vendors and employees. And I think it's a great place to work. Mm-hmm. I truly love what I do, and I'd love for them to experience it, but they have no obligation to do so.
Yeah. Cool. And I'm sure they see your passion that you put into this business too. And I hope they not only see it, but I hope they appreciate it, because there's nothing better than having a mentor like that give them the freedom to make choices, but also they've got an option should they choose to come into the business.
Yeah, and I've in the agreement, it says I have high expectations of anybody who works here, and my expectations of you are even higher. And I'm not going to take any slackers. And you would be terminated if you kind of just walked into this and felt that you were entitled to it.
Isn't that funny in family/business how we are probably more lenient in some cases and way more severe and strict in other cases. It's just how it works. And people who maybe have worked in a corporate world or another job or something like that, they're thinking about this little entrepreneur bug that bit them in the booty and they want to move on with it. These are all things that you need to think about too,
I don't think people appreciate how hard small business owners work and what we do and how we think about it all the time. As you mentioned, we were moving because of this renovation, and my boys were helping me. We were moving a whole bunch of boxes down the street, and they really worked hard. And we put in a good couple of hours of work, and they said, can we take a break? And my wife is the hardest working person that I know. And I knew that she was up the street working harder than we were, and she was not taking a break. I said, your mom's not taking a break. I don't think we need to take a break. Let's keep going.
Yeah, you said it right. I don't think people realize how hard people work in small business. And that's why Shawn and I kind of started this show, is that to highlight and let people tell their story. Because no matter how successful a business becomes, how early stage it is or how long it's been around, business is hard. It's not easy. And it becomes emotional because, we've had some people that we interview get emotional on the show because it's like their business is who they are. And, you talk about, working hard and long hours and stuff like that. And people don't realize that, like, I never turn it off. It's like, the minute I lay my head down on the pillow at night, I'm still thinking about it. And then I have like a moment of peace as I'm asleep. And the second I wake up, the first thing I do is like grab my phone to check email. It's like to see, like, did something happen overnight? Did someone's software system go down? It is like the hardest. I'm young, but it is like the hardest thing I think I've experienced in my life.
It's far harder than most people realize. As you mentioned, as you looked at your friends' parents, most people look from the outside and say, oh, isn't it nice you get to see all these things and you see the external things. And there are wonderful things that come with owning your own business. And I truly love it and love the freedom to make our own decisions, to be aggressive, to make changes, to innovate. But it is something that you stay with. It carries with you all the time. You never let it go. And whereas others, they can let it go.
Well, making decisions about inventory, the build out, making sure that payroll is covered, whatever the frequency is that you pay, this wonderful staff that you have. I mean, there are so many pieces to this that, so many layers, I guess. And it's funny listening to Antonino, with the eyeballs that he looks into a certain business when we do an interview versus the eyeballs that I have and the experiences we had. And that's what makes this such a wonderful thing, being able to pull information from people and capturing these stories.
It's cool because I don't think people realize, at least like, I'm kind of opening up a little bit here, but as I ask questions, they're because I'm genuinely curious about a person's situation. And I think I've been really fortunate because we've had some really cool guests on here, and to hear their story and their experiences and their advice, they don't realize how valuable that is to other listeners or not just myself, but to other, maybe younger kids who are listening to this show. I just met last week with a gentleman for lunch, and he has a very successful business, and I just sat with him for an hour and just picked his brain. And, I offered to pay for lunch, and he was like, no, like, I'll pay for it. And I was like, thank you so much. I said, but like, you're doing me a huge favor. Like, you don't realize that, like, you might just be viewing me as this random kid telling me stories, answering my questions, but the value I got from you is priceless. And he was like, I'll never forget this. He said to me, he was like, when I was your age and I was starting my business, I didn't have I had people who, for whatever reason, helped me and gave me advice that I felt that I never deserved. And I could never repay those people back because I never got to a point in my career where I succeeded them and could help them in a way. He's like, and so this is my way of paying it forward. So, that's my point is that the experiences that you share are valuable to me, but to, I think, all of our listeners.
I've found that to be so true. I have had many mentors along the way who've shared of themselves, who've shared their wisdom and experience, and I've grown so much from it. I regularly keep in touch with other business owners outside of my industry and in my industry, and they are willing to share and being open. And this gentleman that you referred to, and now that I've been in the business a little bit longer, I have the opportunity to share with some younger people. And don't underestimate the value that you're giving him by him having the opportunity to share with you, that he cares about helping others because he himself was helped by somebody else. So you're gaining from it, but you're also making him feel valued because he is creating value for you.
Yeah. It makes me feel better.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
It's funny too with Antonino, as I've gotten to know him more and more over the last 5-6 years, something like that. When you kick an idea past him, this young man does not sleep. This will stew in his mind for as long as as long as he allows it to be there. But it's so funny because he runs with a lot of things, and we have been super fortunate to interview so many good people. And this is one of those other stories. This is different. I really love this. You can tell again the sincerity, just the passion you have for this industry and this business and the customers that you serve. That's what it's all about.
It really is. As I mentioned before, I absolutely love what I do, and I get to deal with people during the happiest times of their lives. We get to help them in so many ways. And when I think of the connections that we've developed, we have families that we've helped through multiple generations, that their great-grandfather bought the engagement ring from my great-grandfather and all the way through. And now I've been in the business long enough, I'm starting to sell engagement rings and wedding bands to the children of people I sold engagement rings and wedding bands to. That is so cool. And many times they've moved on. They don't live in Pittsburgh anymore, but those kids are actually coming back for the weekend or dealing with me remotely because their parents had such a trusting experience with us.
You could probably write a book based on the individual experiences you've had with particular families over the years, where it would be this heartfelt, touching, I'm sure, because this is different. This isn't walking into buy laundry detergent somewhere. This is a whole different experience. And again, with heirloom quality and things like that, it's able to pass down through different generations if that's what they choose to do. And you're a part of this thing. You've allowed a portion of that to happen. So I think it's really cool.
There's one individual I can think of. He always said, if you don't know your jewels, know your jeweler. And he had been a client for a long, long time, and his sons were clients, and I just had the privilege of selling an engagement ring to his grandson. And that was just so cool to me, to help the family with something so important, so sentimental.
Yeah. That is cool, because I think, you had mentioned it earlier, but as we're doing this episode, I'm kind of just thinking in my head, I've always been told that the most important decision you will make in your life is getting married, or deciding to get married and who you will marry. And it's like, perhaps the second most important decision might be the jewelry or the engagement ring that you purchase, for that person. So yeah, I it's always interesting interviewing people in different industries, because, I only know what I know, and, you come in, you hear people's stories, and I never kind of had that mentality of jewelry, being, an heirloom or like a emotional thing. But then I think about it too, like the jewelry that I wear, like this, my chain hasn't, I honestly don't think this has left my neck in like 20 years.
Right.
So.
And it doesn't have to be a $20,000 piece either.
Right.
This is just something that is very important to you, and think of how many people that you've helped in that regard. Incredible.
That's exactly right. It's not about the value.
Yeah.
It's about the sentiment that piece carries with you and the connection to your family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's
so
awesome.
Let's get into that question.
Yeah. So this has been awesome. We're kind of getting towards the end here. And one of the last major questions we've asked this to all our guests. It's my personal favorite question to ask on the show. And that question is, if you can give one word of advice to a young entrepreneur or someone who wants to start a business, what would that be?
A single word or a phrase?
So it could be a phrase, a sentence, or just like a piece of advice.
Yeah, I would say believe in yourself and, continue to pursue your dreams, that you can do it. And also, this is more than one word of advice, be willing to ask for help, that there are people out there who care and are willing to help and share their wisdom and advice, and they're happy to do it.
Yeah, I think that's great, because, that last part about asking for help, that was the hardest thing for me to learn. I always thought I had to do it all myself, and doing everything by yourself is not scalable. So, I do a software consulting business, and my background was computer science. That's what I went to school for, and I thought, I'm all I need. I can do it all. And it's like, no, as you can't grow, you can't scale, because you have to be willing to ask for help, and you have to be able to create a team. Like, you mentioned too about your employees and having, a good team creates that experience. It builds your business. So I think that's fantastic advice.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What do you want to share with the audience? I know you've shared a lot about the history and the clients you serve, and maybe a little bit of the future. What do you want to say to our audience to welcome them here, just to be part of this experience?
Well, we want to say everyone is welcome. We truly want to see anybody and everybody come through the door, whether you're coming in to buy a $15 watch battery or to buy something for $100,000. And we genuinely are going to give you the same level of customer service, and we're going to care. And I always say, we are doing someone a disservice if we don't treat them well enough that they feel that they need to come and shop with us. Right. Because I know in the long run, whether it's the warranty, taking care of things way down the road, they're going to be better served coming to Henne Jewelers than they are going to any place else. So we genuinely care, and we want you to give us a chance.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and going off that, where do you kind of see this going into the future? Do you have any future plans to expand, to, take this further, to become global? What are your future plans here?
Well, right now, I just want to get through this major renovation where we doubled the size of the store. We're increasing some inventory. We're growing our staff. So we want to get through this, make sure that we're running smoothly and efficiently. Really want to add that component where we're able to really sell remotely. And then as we continue to move forward, we want to look at ways that we can grow in additional locations.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah.
I can say I really enjoyed this. This was a completely different vibe compared to some of the other people that we've interviewed. I love the location. I love the story behind everything that you're offering here. And again, I think because you've got this kind of intimate connection with a lot of the clients, again, you could create a book, I'm sure, just based on experiences. And wonder how you could serve that up. You could roll that into your marketing.
Well, we actually, in our marketing, first off, our tagline is Jewelers for Life, right? Because we're here to serve you through your lifetime and to celebrate life's so many precious moments. But what we do is we celebrate a lot of our young couples. So if you look at, we run billboards, we have photos in our store, we have Instagram, where we really highlight the love relationships of these couples, how they've come together, maybe their wedding photos, things like that. And that really is been a lot of fun to get connected to them through this, and then also share their story.
So I've seen the billboards. Those are actual clients? Those are
100%. All actual
I did
clients.
not know that. That's really cool, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have, people are asking to be up on the billboard. They're asking to be up on the wall, to be highlighted. And what's fun is that some of our customers who've been with us a long time, I don't want to say older, and maybe got married 20 or 25 years ago, they'll say, hey, what about sharing our photo? Because they got engaged and married before we started to do this.
Just tell them the billboard starts at the $50,000 threshold. That's how we get you in there.
Yeah. Create a marketing plan that pays, your marketing plan. There you go.
That's good.
That's really cool.
Well, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, this is really cool.
I think this is a really neat operation that you have here, more than an operation. And what you're doing with the rest of the building, tremendous. It's a beautiful build out.
Yeah.
Thanks. We're super excited about it. And again, the comments that our customers have made have been incredible. They're excited for us. They're excited for Shadyside. Some have even said they're excited for Pittsburgh for what this does.
Yeah. Like I said, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and so your store name stands out in my mind. So when Dylan kind of brought up, John would want to come on the show, I was like, fantastic. I was like, pick a date. I was like, I'll be there. So that's really cool. So, but John, thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing your advice and your experiences. This is going to be very beneficial to our listeners.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. We appreciate the time.